Everyone, and welcome to Lesson Design, a Lions University course brought to you by the USA-Canada Lions Leadership Forum. My name is Lion Terry Graham, and I would like to welcome you to tonight's webinar. I would also like to remind you that we're recording this session for those who can't participate tonight and for anyone wishing to review the material at a later time. Once we begin, you'll be able to ask or to respond to a question, and you may have a question for yourself. This can be handled by typing a question into the question pane on the panel on the right side of your screen or by raising your hand, and we can unmute you so you can share your comments with the other participants. Assisting me tonight will be past District Governor Wendy Kane, who will be monitoring the question pane. And if you have any questions, we should be able to handle that right away. Wendy is off-site tonight, so if she talks a little bit, her voice may be muffled, kind of because she's in Washington instead of being at home. Lesson Design is course number 302 in the doctorate program. This is a program designed to advance a Lion to a level above the club and the district. The doctorate program will be required a completion of 9 courses with the final project. This is Lion. When you click on any of the course, the required courses is a 300 doctorate program as an overview and a project of understanding. There will be 9 elective courses with a project, of course, and at the end, these are the elective courses with. And as you can see, if you just click on any of the courses, you'll be taken directly to that course page, which will give you all the details of the course, along with the link to register for the course and links of any course handouts or availability in the course quiz. And also, if I would like to mention, there is a calendar page you can log on to, and you'll be able to see the upcoming webinars that are going to be scheduled for later. After participating in the webinar or watching the video on the web, you can click on that small tab at the bottom and mark as completed by a red arrow. This will take you to a page to take you to the quiz. When you complete the quiz, submit your answers, and you will instantly be given the results to know how well you did. A passing grade is at least 70%. On the course page at the back of the slide, you will review, click on My Account, and you'll see the courses you have completed in the Master's and Bachelor's, and hopefully as we move forward more in the doctorate degree. Our faculty member tonight is District Governor A.J. Westland. Lion A.J. is a member of the Westerville Lions Club in Multiple District 13. He has a vast knowledge of training that he's done with the American Red Cross and FEMA. He's been served in the military as a Lion. He's been a member since 2007. Of course, he's gone through all the different regional institutes and the RRLI. He's attended many USA-Canada Lions leadership forums. He's been involved with the Lions Alert program. And being a Lions family, his father, Lion Jim, was a member of the Riverside Lions in Pennsylvania. I give you Lion A.J. Take it away, A.J.
Thank you, PID Lion Terry. I appreciate the introduction. Good morning, or good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm not sure when you're going to be listening to this, but tonight we're going to be talking about lesson design. Our objectives are to try to understand why you should create lesson plans, the roles and qualities of an effective instructor, and then different approaches to lesson design. This was a unique task for me because I'm normally tasked in creating lesson plans, but not how to break it down and talk about how we do it. So this is going to be a fun discussion. If you guys have questions, please feel free to holler the question panel. So next slide, maybe. So when we talk about why create a lesson plan, you know, we have to really think about what is the message that you want your participants to come out with, and try to, you know, think about that what if question and try to get those, you know, thoughts, and that becomes the basis for your lesson plan. When we're talking about that, we need to make sure that we're including, you know, lesson objectives that connect to a broader course objective. So, Tonight we're talking about lesson plans, so I'm going to show you some examples. We're going to be talking about that. Identification of the content to be covered within that lesson. So, are you doing one subject, like when we're talking about, lines alert? Are we talking about preparedness, or are we talking about response? The preparedness, you could spend a couple hours just talking on preparedness, and you could spend a couple hours just talking on response. What does your audience want to get out of this presentation? You also have to think about what type of activities you want. Are you trying to do group work? Are you trying to do problem solving? Are you doing just strictly a lecture where you're presenting the information like I am tonight, and asking questions at the end? Or is it going to be more give and take as to how we're going to do that? You have to think about the resources and materials needed, and as we're getting into the technology area, I've got a couple of slides that talk about the newest technologies out there. You have to think about your allotted time frame. For tonight, I have less than an hour to get this across to you guys. We started at 8 and we need to end at 9 or a little bit before, so that everybody can continue on with the rest of their day. And then if there's any stuff that needs to be done after class or completed prior to the class, thinking about that type of thing. So if you have a pre-assignment, like a pre-quiz or a pre-test that you're going to be giving people, and then the method of assessment. Are you giving an actual test? Is it a hands-on skill that you need to do? From my first aid and CPR, classes, you have the skill of performing CPR to the correct standard, and to pass the course, you need to be able to do that. So it's those various methods of assessment that you have to think about. So if we can move on to the next slide. So when we're talking about why creating lesson plans, you have to be the, you have to chart the course. You are the navigator, and you need to make sure that you have the best path that you want your learners to follow to reach the new mountains that they are climbing. I tried my best to work in International President Corlew's theme. But that's really, when you're looking at your lesson plan, you're developing that roadmap. You're trying to figure out, where do I have the people, where are they starting from, and where do I need them to go by the end of our time together? And if you're doing, a multi-day class, that may be, you can break things down a little easier and make sure that they understand those chunks. If you're doing a 1-hour session like we're doing now, you kind of have to condense everything, and sometimes that navigation is very important, because you need to make sure you're heading in that direction you need them to go. So if we move to the next slide. When we're talking about effective instructors, you need to make sure that you're a subject matter expert. Most of the time you're presenting on something that you have a skill in, and you are the expert at that time. If you're doing a multiple people with that, you need to make sure that everyone has their specific topics that they're going to be talking about. You need to be a trainer. You need to be able to figure out how best to get your message across. And again, if we're talking a skill, what type of equipment, what type of things do you need to do as an instructor that gets that point across? You need to be an evaluator. You need to be able to evaluate the people in your class and figure out, are they getting the message? Are you talking at the 10,000-foot overview and you're losing people because they want to get down in the weeds? For those of you that have been teaching classes, you kind of understand that. For others, you don't want to talk at such a high level that you're losing people, but you don't want to talk at such a low level that everybody's going, this is really boring and I don't need to listen to this person. You need to make sure that you're a friend and a coach. That's one of the best parts that I like as an instructor, is I try to figure out who are the people in my class and how can I make sure that they have an enjoyable time, you know, what type of, you know, and hopefully when they're done with the class, they enjoy and, you know, we become friends. I know that's happened with Dean Wendy and I, and hopefully PID Terry after this class. You need to make sure that you're a role model. You know, if you're doing certain skills, you want to design the lesson plan so that, you know, people are fitting into those roles. If they're having to be a responder, that they're going to respond correctly to that situation. And the last thing you need to be is an effective classroom manager. How many times have you been in a presentation where someone has come up with a question that's kind of off the wall and kind of throws the presenter in a totally different direction? So you need to be able to manage that classroom or that lecture hall or whatever you've got going on. Next slide, please. When you're talking about being a subject matter expert, you know, we need to make sure that, you know what learning objectives and the content for that course. You know, you need to make sure that you know how the courses relate to each other. If it's a multi-day session that you're trying to plan out, that, you know how everything ties together. Even in single-day sessions or this hour-long session, how things tie together, how we bridge everything. And then how to conduct those hands-on exercises. If you have to do a hands-on skills check, you need to know as the instructor how to do that skill, because people are going to be looking at you for, you know, is this correct? And if it's not, what are the techniques that you need to know as the subject matter experts to make sure that you're able to effectively help that person? And a lot of that comes down to thinking about the class during the lesson design portion. Before I go on to the next slide, are there any questions or anything?
I see Carla Harris has her hands up. Carla, I'm going to unmute you, okay? There you go. Are you there, Carla?
Hi, Line Carla, what's your question?
It doesn't seem to be coming on. I'll just give her another few seconds here, or I'll take her hand down. Maybe she'll put it back up again if she has some audio. We can't, I can't hear her for anything, so I'll just take her off, put her on mute again. Maybe she can get her things organized again. So I don't see any other hands up, AJ.
Not a problem. Line Carla, if you want to type in your question, we'll come back to it. But time, let's move on to you know, what you need to do as a trainer. You need to make sure that you know the people in the class and that you're able to develop your lesson plan to deal with various learning styles. Not everyone learns the same. My wife is Line is very good at listening to someone and being able to get everything from that. I'm more of a person where I'm more kinesthetic. I need to actually physically do something. If I can do it, then I can break down those sets of skills and figure out, okay, this is the steps that need to happen, and that's the way I learn. You need to make sure that you know what adult needs from the instructor to learn best. You know, are people wanting handouts? I know that there weren't handouts today, but you'll be able to review the recording of this presentation so that if you have other questions, you can always come back to it. And you have to have effective presentation skills. When we're talking about, if you want to move on to the next slide, when we're talking about being an evaluator, you know, you have to make sure that you know how to figure out if that behavior has changed. You know, there are formal ways where you can ask questions. There are informal ways where if you're in a group full of people and you see everyone nodding their head and you see that little light bulb that appears above their head, then you know they've got it. You have to, if you don't have that ability, then you have to figure out what are the best ways I can learn questioning skills, and how much time do I need to build into the lesson to figure out if everyone's getting this. and then giving and receiving feedback. And there are a number of Lions University courses that talk about feedback, so we won't go into that in great depth. Next slide. When we talk about being a friend and a coach, you know, having the relationship with the class as a whole and, you know, those individuals in a class. When I'm giving a presentation, I like looking out and seeing, you know, making a connection with the class to make sure that I see that everybody's getting that nugget of knowledge and seeing if those light bulbs turn on. Try to put the class at ease, you know, put those team members at ease, especially when you're getting into something, you know, very specific like in Lions Alert when we're talking about response and you're dealing with, you know, after a disaster. There's some skills that you need to be able to, you know, make sure that they're comfortable with. And that also leads us into motivating team members, and there are numerous courses throughout Lions University that talk about member motivation, and that's, you know, so as you can see, a lot of this builds on other courses that we've already talked about, or hopefully that you've already taken. Fine, Wendy, if you move on. With role model, you know, we want to make sure we're reinforcing those important habits. You know, we want to make sure that we're doing everything as safely as possible when we're, you know, I'll take a really simple example. You know, when we're talking about teaching people how to drive a car, you know, we want to make sure that we're putting on our seatbelt so that they're knowing that they have to put on their seatbelt. So it's reinforcing that habit, reinforcing that safety, and then, you know, trying to use that appropriate use of humor. I try to make my classes laugh because I feel if the class is laughing, then they're learning. They're having a good time and everything is coming together. So that, you know, you can see that everybody in that picture, you know, all the blue marbles are staring up at that red marble. You know, we're trying to make sure that that person is emulating what needs to be done. I'll take another quick break for any questions. Anything coming through, Lion Terry or Lion Wendy?
I don't see anything coming through. Carla did have her hand up. I'm not sure whether it's just up or what happened there, but I can unmute her again and see if she's there. I don't, oh, I got another hand up. I see Julian, Lion Julian. If you got a question, I'll unmute you.
I was going to say that this is Lion Julian, Toronto. I was going to say that the pace of the lecture tonight is going a little bit quick, I think maybe, because we may have persons that have never really experienced, and if they would like to really pick this up, if we can slow a little bit.
Not a problem. I was just trying to make sure that I was covering everything that we needed to cover, but I can slow down. Was there something specific you wanted me to spend a little more time on, Lion Julian?
Not necessarily myself, but thinking of my other students on board tonight, it may be, I'm not sure, but this is part of my thing that I think that may affect some of our persons listening tonight. So just a tidbit, not much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you for your feedback. Lion Wendy, do we have any typed in questions?
I see one here, AJ, from Lion Tom Gordon. Anything about the neutral responses to participants' responses?
Are you talking about, Lion Tom, are you talking about the blank stares you get, or when you ask a question and you hear nothing but crickets? You know, you ask that question to make sure everybody's understanding. And
I'll unmute Lion Tom. I'll unmute Lion Tom. Lion Tom, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
So. Yes.
Oh, okay, good. I was just wondering, you know, your participants give you responses when you're asking questions. And I found it's really critical not to say, hey, that's a great answer, and then for the next person just saying, well, thank you, and then moving on. You have to keep that response that you give to people giving you answers fairly neutral, or at least the same. And it's kind of hard to do. That's a great response to every answer. So you have to find something that you're comfortable with as a facilitator.
And we're actually going to get into that a little bit later when we talk about different styles and things, as we're talking about when you're developing your plan, how you do that. So thank you for bringing that up, Lion Tom.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands up, AJ, so we'll carry on.
Okay. Line Wendy, if you want to move on to Classroom Manager. You know, this is a big thing, and probably a reason why I was trying to rush is making sure that in my head I was doing my own time management and the transitioning. So I apologize if I was going a little fast, Line Julian, but just trying to make sure that we're getting that idea of transitioning from one topic to another and how it all relates to everything. Also, when you're running training equipment, you know, for CPR and first aid courses, when we're talking about the AEDs, making sure that the AED training machines work, that you've got the batteries, that your presentation equipment is working, so that you know, if you're relying on a PowerPoint, the projector and everything is working. For those of you who may have remembered the old overheads, and the overhead bulb blows and you still have 15 other overheads to go over. So trying to make sure you've got all of that. Arranging the room effectively for those activities. So thinking about in your plan what type of activities you're going to try to run with your presentation, and making sure you've got adequate space, but also adequate time. Gets back to the time management of getting back and forth between where they are, if they're in a lecture hall, and then outside to, you know, work on a team building event, and then getting them back in and effectively transitioning between those two areas, because you don't want everybody to, you know, take 15, 20 minutes every time they leave the room, because then there goes the rest of your day. Working with participants with different agendas, and then the one that I listed was physical or mental limitations. Some of my best CPR students have been students who are visually impaired. Their placement and everything is awesome once they get to where that victim is. Their body mechanics and getting lined up where to do the correct skills. But had I not thought about that when I first started teaching, that could have been a major problem trying to get that. As Lion Tom was saying, you know, being inclusive, making sure you're incorporating the same style and everything with everyone. So you're trying to be the same for everybody. And then dealing with sensitive topics, trying to figure out, you know, when I'm teaching HIV/AIDS classes with the Red Cross, that's a very sensitive topic. So there's a lot of people that have a lot of different emotions when you're talking about that. So knowing how to deal with that effectively. Line Wendy, if you want to move on to the evolution of learning. We've got so many different technology aspects now. We've got the virtual education, which is basically what, you know, a lot of what we're doing now, the web-based training and computer-based training. I consider this class virtual in that you guys are at your locations and you're listening to me talk about lesson plans. You know, so we're, you know, I can't control your physical environment. I can't control whether your dog is, you know, whining at the door, or, you know, if you're in a lecture, you know, if you're in another lecture hall and it's very loud, or the equipment isn't working at your location, which I apologize if it isn't, but there's not a whole lot I can do from my end because I'm here in, you know, Westerville, Ohio. You know, you have to also have to think for live training. A lot of times the technology, people get so tied up with, I have to have my PowerPoint, I have to, you know, I have to have all my little doodads and gizmos. Sometimes you have to give up on that because you have to make sure that you're reaching the attendees on a personal level. You know, what's going to make that spark, what's going to get them tuned into what you're trying to talk about. One of the next topics we're going to talk about is preparation.
Excuse me, AJ, before we move on, Lion Nancy had a question on how do you request people to fill in the front of the room instead of sitting at the back?
That's a really interesting question. What I've personally done is, depending on the size of the class, I will, and depending on the size of the room and how it's set up, I will set up chairs in just the first 2 rows, and that kind of forces people all the way up front. And then if I get more people, then they get to set up their own chairs. I've done that a couple of times, and it's worked well. But if it's a pre-set up room, like in the Lions in the forums, I haven't figured out a good way to get people that not fit in the back. I move around a lot. My wife is laughing at me right now. Lion Amy's laughing at me because I'm actually pacing while I'm doing this presentation because I'm a mover. So I move around a lot. So that's the way I figure it out.
I got an answer. Reserved seating.
And Lion Amy, my wife just mentioned reserve seating.
You walk the back rows and you have to go into the front.
She was saying put tape or something that the back rows are reserved seating, and those are for special people. Everybody else has to move up front. I've never thought of that approach, but that might work.
Sounds very interesting.
Okay, Lion Nancy, that answered your question.
Yep, Lion Tom had a little comment. He said the reserved or nameplate mats, and that's basically what you were saying, to fill in make a reserved section towards the back, and people will move to the front. So that's a good point, Lion Tom. I'll let you carry on then, AJ.
Okay. When we're talking about lesson plans, I bring up this that preparation is a 3-legged stool. You really have to think about this, and a lot of time goes into this lesson design because you have to figure out what are the learning objectives that you need to get across. What do you want people to leave the class knowing, or at least being engaged on? The second one is course content, making sure that it's solid, making sure that, if you have videos, that the videos tie in with what you're talking about, that the hands-on skills they're learning tie in with everything, that the group activities all, support those learning objectives that you've worked on. And the last one is logistics. You have to make sure that you've got the logistics down. So where are, as funny as this sounds, where are the restrooms? Where are the emergency exits should something happen? Where are the other things that you need to have as a presenter for the rest of the class, especially if you're doing a lot of group activities and a lot of things where you're having the class move around versus just sitting in a room listening to you lecture. So, I always think of it as that 3-legged stool. You could, if you don't have if you only have 2 legs, you could sit on that stool, but you got to do a lot of balancing. That 3-legged stool makes it pretty, solid, and, hopefully you're not fluffy and break it like I've broken a couple here at my house. And hopefully everybody's laughing. I'm trying to use appropriate humor. The next one, when we're talking about effective instructors, I'm going to go through this list pretty quickly because you guys can all read. So, but I want to hit on a couple. You need to make sure that as an instructor, you're prepared. I try to be as energetic and enthusiastic as I can, and I try to develop that interest. I try to figure out what do the people need and what can I give to them to make sure that everybody is good. I try to be sensitive to people's needs. I try to make it fun. I also make it safe, but I also try to make it interactive so people aren't just sitting there going, we're listening to somebody speak for an hour, why? I try to make it interactive. That's why I'm asking questions of you guys. I try not to do war stories unless they relate specifically to something that we need to know. The one example I will give you guys is teaching a class on vehicle safety, and we talked about making sure all the drivers are doing a 360 as they go around their vehicle. And the reason this came up was person pulled in, they were filling up with gas, they were going out to, they go in and they pay, they're getting ready to leave, and had the person not done a 360, they would have never noticed that someone had put a baby carrier with a baby in it on their back bumper. Had he just gotten in his car and pulled away, the baby could have gotten hurt. But had, you know, he did his 360 around the car, and, you know, so those type of stories, you know, as long as they're relevant to the training and with vehicle safety, that 360 story was that. But if you're just having people go on and on about stories that, you know, happen to a friend of a friend of a friend, you know, kind of can drag out. You want to make sure that you're being patient and have a sense of humor. I feel sense of humor is very important. And try not to be Ferris Bueller's teacher and be monotone and be very just droning on and on and on and have people just tune you out, because after a while, that's what will happen. And if you've ever seen Ferris Bueller, you know the teacher I'm talking about. The actor is Ben Stein. He's a great person, but I think that role was written specifically for him, because that was a great role. When you're talking about another quality of an effective instructor, the thing that I found when I was doing this was the credibility. And this is the funny part, because you guys can't really see me, but it's 45% on how you appear. So hopefully you like my picture from the beginning. 45% on how you sound, and only 10% on the actual words you say. That was amazing to me when I found this study, and I was just like, wow. You know, so it's how you sound and how you appear that makes people go, I got it. And you know, only 10% are actually focusing on the words, which to me was incredible. But you have to make sure that, you know, you understand when you're designing your class how you're going to look, how you're going to sound when you're in front of that class. And if you're designing this for somebody else, you need to make sure that they understand all of this, because if they're just reading from a book, and you guys have probably all been through classes where the instructor just got up in front and read from the book word for word, and you're like, I'm an adult, I could read, what's the deal? You know, that gets to be a pain. And by the way, Lion Wendy, I really like the teach and learn graphic on there. That was really good. Thank you for including that. One of the other things, some of the other things we talked about, you know, being sincere, enthusiastic, being interesting, you know, sometimes you have to be convincing. Sometimes you're giving a presentation and you're trying to convince people that, you know, what they need to be doing next. A lot of Lions Alert is all about convincing people that they need to be prepared. You know, being expressive, being professional, and sometimes being assertive. You know, you get that person who's in the back of the class and they're waving their hand because they want to tell a war story, and you have to keep the class moving in the correct direction. So that gets to be fun. Are there any questions, comments, concerns before we move on to my last?
No, I don't see any typed in questions, and I don't see any hands up, so I think we're good to go.
Okay. When we talk about appearance, you need to be neat and clean, simple. My line Amy wanted me to put no jingles. For those of you who know me, you know I'm a pin collector, and my jacket is full of pins. I've had to remove a lot of the dangles because they jingle a lot, and sometimes they can be distracting. And so you want to think about, you know, what type of professional attire, what fits the class that you're trying to teach. And a lot of this is in that pre-planning stage. You have to figure out, you know, what's the message I'm trying to get across, what's going to be the best, not for lack of a better term, what's the best costume I should be wearing to make sure that people are getting the message that I'm trying to present. With the, you know, when we're talking about doing your voice. We talked about making sure that you're not monotone, making sure you vary your volume, that you're not talking so loud that people are thinking you're screaming at them, and the people, you know, in the front of the room are going deaf, and the people in the back of the room are going, I can hear you, and I'm in the back of the room. But you don't want to talk so soft that the people in front are trying to lean in, trying to hear you, and the people in the back are having their own conversation because they can't hear you. You want to make sure that you're not going too fast or too slow. So I thank you, Lion Julian, for bringing up that I was going a little fast. I apologize about that. I was just trying to make sure that I was covering the material and making sure we've got everything that we need to cover. One of the things that I like to do is, you know, pause for emphasis when I'm dealing with Lions Alert and we're talking about preparedness, and I ask the question of what can happen in your area, and I just pause and I wait and I let that sink in for people to start thinking about what could actually happen. You know, when we're teaching first aid and CPR, and I ask if anyone has ever seen someone have an incident in front of them and not known what to do. And then I'll pause for the dramatic effect of trying to get them in that mindset of something happens, do I know what to do? And then the fun part, watching your ers, ums, ahs, so's. That's one of the ones that I use quite a bit, according to Lion Amy. She actually was doing a presentation. She was watching me do a presentation. She was actually counting the number of so's that I was conducting, and the number was astounding to me at the end. So this is where that preparation comes in, trying to figure out how to comfortably get the information across, where you're not going too slow, not going too fast. When we're talking about attitude, this is a huge thing. I don't know if you guys can see the little graphic there, but you know, it's a puzzle piece that all have to go together. You have to have, you know, a safe learning environment, and the teacher's attitudes and actions affect that learning environment. You know, you've got the graduated consequences of, you know, if the people don't feel comfortable, they don't feel safe. If the instructor is talking over their heads, you know, and then, you know, the proactive classroom management. We've already talked about that a lot during this presentation, but you have to really think about that when you're designing your classes and designing your lesson plans. How can I proactively incorporate all of this? You know, am I being positive? Am I being accepting and enthusiastic and encouraging? Or am I turning everybody off? You know, you need to make sure that you're confident and calm, and if you can pull off your presentation and make it seem like you're just having a conversation with someone. You know, if I'm just talking to Lion Carla or Lion Tom or Lion Julian, you know, and making that personal connection, it comes off as really interesting versus being talked at the entire time. I will pause here for any thoughts or questions on this.
Lion AJ, there was Lion Liz has asked a question about no strong fragrances, and I think when you do your housekeeping right at the start, that's kind of a little too late in the program to say about strong fragrances. But is there a special way you can handle that before going in, or?
Well, that really is really, when you think about when you're planning this entire presentation and trying to think of your, you know, lesson plan, what type of environment you're going to be in. If you're going to be in an outdoor environment, there may be things in that environment that affect people. So, you know, indoors, I'm not really sure how you can deal effectively when people come in and they've got way too much cologne or too much.
Well, actually, if I interrupt a bit, Lion Liz clarified a little bit, and she said for the presenter.
Oh, the presenter, yes. I try to, make sure that I'm freshly prepped, but I try not to wear strong things, especially if I'm going to be doing a lot of hands-on close work with people, because I know there's a lot of people that have those type of things. So I personally don't wear strong, cologne. But I know of other instructors that that's their normal personality is to wear that. So you just have to really think about your audience at that time and think, okay, am I going to be up front where no one's going to be able to tell what I'm wearing, or am I going to be in amongst them doing a group activity and everyone's going to pick up on, that I'm wearing enough cologne that I go through 3 bottles.
Well, that's very true. I think it's almost pretty common nowadays not to be wearing fragrances even on airplanes as we travel. Sorry, Liz, I had that. I missed your meaning of that. Ryan Julian had a question. Would you ever refuse a microphone, saying at the front, yeah, we've all heard this, oh, I don't need that, my voice is really strong?
That really depends on the environment you're in. If you are in a small lecture hall and the acoustics are very good, you may not need that microphone. But if you're in a big room, like at the USA-Canada forums, and you've got people that are lined up, you got a standing room only class, and you've got people lined up at the back door, they may not be able to hear you, and when they start their side conversations because they can't hear what's going on, then that becomes distracting to people. So you really have to base it on your environment and how best to get that message across. And that's where you want to do the prep work and figure out where you're teaching, where you're presenting, and
I think if you watch your audience too, you can see people turning their heads a little bit, trying to get a little bit their head in a different position to hear you a little better, and you can kind of pick up on those little bit of the cues that are coming from the audience.
Yes, those nonverbal cues become very important, and if you're just up at the front and you're just staring at your screen or staring at your papers the entire time and never looking at the audience, you'll miss those cues. Which is one of the things that Amy teases me about all the time, is that when I'm doing a presentation, I actually get my steps in. When I'm teaching a presentation, I am walking through the audience, and that's my way of engaging with them. So that's just what I do. But there are other people that just want the podium and they're just behind there. That's their safe zone.
Lion Tom made a comment to never to refuse a microphone, and Lion Christian said that a good instructor always uses a microphone if one is available. You may not think you need it, but most who think they don't really do.
And you also have to think about if you've got anybody in your presentations who are going to be either visually impaired and need the handouts in larger print, or you've got people who are auditory impaired, deaf or hard of hearing, that you may need to make sure that you've got signers available, which is one of the reasons that I started walking around. Is I am an interpreter, so I can see where people may, be signing, and I can come over and start signing, or, talk with my interpreter if there is one assigned, and make sure that they're with the people that need it, and making sure that I'm not going too fast or too slow for them. Because that's also another thing that you have to think about when you're doing your lesson plans with your audience is, who's going to be in that audience, and what do you need to do to meet their needs.
Sounds good, AJ. I think we'll move. I don't see any more questions here, so maybe we'll move on.
Okay. When we talk about quality lesson design, my focus is always on the team member, the person who's coming into my presentation. What do I want them to walk out knowing, or what, and when I'm designing classes, I play what if a lot, and I try to figure out how much time do I need to focus on certain topics. I want to make sure that everybody gets it, but I don't also want to go over it so much that I'm beating a dead horse and people are like, okay, I've got it, let's move on. I've always thought in all of my presentations that the instruction is a performance. So when you're practicing, you want to make sure that you practice that so it comes off natural, it comes off matter of fact, it comes off that you look really calm, even if inside you want to go running screaming from the room because you're talking to 500 people. If you've practiced and been able to do it okay, it comes off as, oh, that person's really good, they're really comfortable up there. And then you talk to them later and they're a total basket case because they're like, there were 500 people in my class, wow. But you also have to look at what is your style. What, how do you relate to people? And this gets back to line Tom's comment. Everybody has their own teaching style. Everybody has their own way of presenting information. And we've listed a lot of the qualities, and it's just about when you're designing this stuff is figuring out how to play to the strengths of you doing the presentation. The fun part for me is when I'm dealing with national curriculums is trying to design lesson plans that are not cookie cutter, but basically here's the framework, and then I try to put in notes of here's the way I would present this information, and then let the people read that portion and make their own decisions from there. But it's really all about being comfortable in your own skin, and that's where I go back to it's a performance, and you want to make sure that you are together. If you look at the graphic, it says integrity, consistency, and efficiency. When you're giving a presentation and you're giving it multiple times, you will develop that consistency, and people will start to notice that you're giving that same message, but you're able to relate to the audience and be able to figure out how to do certain tweaks so that everybody's getting it, and that helps build your integrity, and you also become efficient at it. And that's one of the things that I enjoy about these presentations is being able to convey my knowledge in a way that gets it out to everybody and make sure that it makes sense. So any questions or any comments on my slide here for quality lesson designs and my thoughts on this?
No, I don't see any hands up, and I don't see anybody typing anything in, so no, I think we're good.
Okay. Because we're coming up to back to our objectives, which we're talking about, understanding why you should create lesson plans and really thinking about what's the message that you want those people to leave with. We talked about the roles and qualities of an effective instructor that you need to build in to your lesson plans. Just winging it may work for a 20-minute presentation, but if you're trying to create hour-long, 2-hour-long presentation and you're doing this multiple times, you need to make sure you've got that consistency and efficiency built in. So that's where the quality lesson designs come in. And then we talked about different approaches. When we talked about, what work is going to be done outside of class, is there a pre-test that you're sending out to everyone? Is there a pre-test that they're filling out when they first come in the room to help? I try to use pre-tests if it's a longer class and I've got time so that I can read what everybody's coming back with so that I know hopefully where people are in their classes so that I can figure out what I need to focus on. And then the post-test, that method of assessment, you need to make sure that people understand that, like for this class, Lion Terry's going to be talking about the quiz that's coming up, that you guys have to pass your quiz with 70% to get credit for this class. There are different ways of doing that assessment. For us, for Lions University, we use the quizzes. and hopefully you guys all be able to pass the quiz today, and that you've enjoyed our session and our time together. We've got about 6-7 minutes, if my clock is not wrong.
I had a couple of questions just come in late from Lan Tom. He said that we all learn techniques that hold us in good stead most of the time. Try some new ones from time to time. Admit it when you're not getting the message across. Then ask the participants how you can help them get what they want.
And that's the other assessment that that I really like using is I like using a post-class survey of asking the students to fill this out, and they can either put their name on it or do it anonymously. But I read through each of those at the end of the sessions because that helps me learn what I need to tweak for the next session, for the next class. That we spent too much time talking about XYZ when we should have been talking about ABC. That we need to make sure that we're understanding how you get from A to D, that you're talking about those B and C categories, as Line Amy would say. She needs to have the B and C. I can normally look at things, I get the A and D and I see how you get from A to D. She needs the B and C to make sure she gets that complete path and gets that navigation.
Ryan Tomo made a comment about do you ever use the gives and gets at the beginning? What you're going to give and what you're going to get out of the presentation.
It really depends on what type of skills, what type of if we're doing a skills-based class, then yes, I will use that and say by the end of class you will know how to do CPR on adults, child, and infant. During a lecture portion, when we're talking about preparedness, I will stress that you will hopefully be leaving the room better prepared than when you came in the room. So it really depends on your topic. So and that's where you have to think about what are the lessons that you want your students to leave the room with. But those are great points, Lion Tom.
Lion Kristen wants to know, should a certain percentage of a course be spent on hands-on activities versus lecture versus discussion, etc.?
Again, that varies by topic. So like if you're doing a skills class like CPR and first aid, then yes, there are certain breakdowns. With the Red Cross, we try to do it that it's 75% of our time is spent on hands-on versus 25% on lecture, because we want the people to leave knowing the skills of how to save someone's life in first aid and CPR. Because we want them to be able to provide care until someone else can get there. EMTs, firefighters, getting them to a hospital. That pre-hospital care is very important, and those skills are vital. So having 75% of that class on the hands-on portion, you leave the class knowing how to do this and feeling comfortable doing it. And that sort of gets to be the important part, is making sure the participants are comfortable performing those skills. But with a lecture, it depends on the topic.
Very good, AJ. Thank you very much. I want to thank AJ and Lion AJ, but I want to say District Governor AJ. I know with your year as District Governor, as most of us have been there before, and we know how busy a year it is with convention time and getting things organized for the rest of the year. So, but you've given us lots of material to think about. Hopefully we can use some of these suggestions in developing our own next seminar. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for allowing me to teach, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to shoot us an email or post questions in the forum so that we can get back with you guys and get you the answers that you need.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to remind the Lions of the next webinar, which is going to be on April 25th. It'll be course number 305, Developing Curriculum. In order to receive credit for this course, go to the site listed at the bottom of the slide, click on the course completed and take the quiz. You will get the results immediately. And don't forget to log out, because a lot of people don't, and we lose that information. That'll be at the top of the page. I also want to thank Lion Past District Governor Wendy for her assistance again tonight. I know she's off site and had to log on. So everybody, I want to thank you for spending some time with us this evening. It's been a very informative evening, and we look forward to being with you again. So enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.